Hello everyone and welcome back to part number 2 of our deck preview for the Man of Steel DLC for Steel Division 2, and this is most likely the one that has the most interest out there, especially because of its two big reasons in the tank tab, but also it is quite the interesting deck all around, coming up out of Operation Market Garden and facing in a lot of interesting units here. So yeah, it already has its good couple of new units in the infantry and recon tab, and the first one is here in the recon tab, which outside of that, rather small, rather weak as well. You can see tanks and recon being the weakest, everything else having quite a decent number. But recon here, we will have the BMWs with radio. Radio sadly in this deck, not super important though. KFZ4, double MGs, but sadly they will never get their AA ability, I believe. And without that, this is just really mediocre. It just dies to everything, and so the two MGs don't really matter. Scharfschütze, decent for recon, decent damage output as well, but obviously dies to anything looking at it, which is its issue. But you get quite a decent number with these guys, and if you keep them on return fire and they don't shoot the enemy, they can be really nice as cheap recon on the battlefield. And then the new unit and the one relatively solid recon infantry here is the SS Landsturm Aufklärer, which has Molotov and MG34, so decent stuff already here. Decent rifle here, the G211, which I believe is a Dutch rifle, with H standing for Holland, if I get that right. And then some Sten SMGs here with decent firepower in general for this whole squad. Obviously, CQC stands really terrible, but at least giving you something there. And then the Molotov helping out in the CQC as well, though obviously together with the MG34, that doesn't really fit. And it's in general just a somewhat better Grenadier squad, kinda. But that with recon optics is nice, and that as a recon unit obviously is decent for 20 points. So at least one thing here going for it in the recon tab. Nothing super fancy, but a nice new unit there. And we continue with quite a good couple of new units in the infantry tab, with the SS Wache Bren being the first one, having all British loadout here, weapons coming from the Dunkirk evacuation, the leftovers of the British army there, coming in here for these forces, with Brents, Stans, and Lee Anfields being the weapon loadout for this German SS Wache here. Disheartened, 10 points, obviously really affordable, and at least some mid-range and CQC firepower, as the Brand can also fire in CQC, but obviously with the Disheartened trait, this is not great. Though the spammability of it is decent. Ersatzgruppen coming with more spammability, but outside of that, obviously not the greatest of unit. 9 hit points, nice meat shield, will always be mediocre, and if you need a meat shield, the Ersatztruppen will be there for you. That's no different here. Then the second SS Wache, which has an MG34 and changes one stand for an MP40, and then has one more Lee Enfield. It costs you 5 points more though, and I don't believe that is worth it compared to the Brand, especially as the MG34 can't fire CQC, so if you ever get, like, this unit is really only limited for longer ranges. Obviously the MG34 is a lot better, but I'm not certain it's 5 points better on a unit without veterancy. So I feel like the SS Wache Bren is what you should go for here, as you can be a bit more careless with them. They can fire on all ranges, whilst the SS Wache in general more focused on the long range. SS Wache Führer, a nice special unit as well. Our first leader unit that has Disheartened and also has zero veterancy, so its circle in which it gives the buff is small. Disheartened also makes it weaker, obviously, gets stressed out quickly, but it costs you only 15 points for a 6-man leader unit and a Faustpatrone, which obviously is rather terrible as an AT weapon, because it only has 8 damage. It doesn't kill medium tanks, but it still does deal with lighter vehicles, and it can deal some damage to the bigger guys as well. So for a 15-point leader, that is quite the loadout. And yeah, you pay for in capability a bit, but 5 of them for 15, really solid unit, and I would say in A phase. as you get a good availability as well. Then we come to the Begleittruppen, which bring us a trait that we haven't talked about yet, Tank Rider, giving you a nice bonus when you have them close to the appropriate tanks. In this case, for the Germans, it's the Stug 3G. Just these guys only coming in C phase in this deck, same to the Stugs. And yeah, the Tank Rider, meaning that they get a bonus in their morale when they're next to tanks around them, or to the Stugs around them. And that obviously is helpful. They have the shock trait, which gives them better CQC damage on top as well. In general, though, a mediocre unit has the Molotovs, has the brand, so it can use that on long and short range. Issue is just that on long range, one single brand not really giving you much firepower. Guys costing you 20 points, and it's only a 6 hit point unit. So the stats really of the traits have to carry you. Those are not fully set in stone yet, so it's not quite as easy to tell you how exactly they all work. But yeah, it will be decent-ish here, I guess, but not the most amazing unit ever. Festungsgrenadiers give you FM24/29s, giving you levels. We already know this unit from the Dunkirk DLC. It is decent there. It's a great man spam unit. 15 hit points, great availability. 20 points spam, has a long range weapon, so it has a okayish amount of firepower as well. Obviously nothing great, but they just are pretty decent at moving forward. Kriegsmarine Infantry, going to a similar loadout. They have better CQC firepower, they have an anti-tank grenade. They lose 2 hit points, but they also don't have the dishearten trait, so interesting similar unit there as well. Lower availability, but still good availability, though damage output still rather mediocre here. So interesting choices there. Then Sicherungs, which I always like. Damage output wise, okay. They have the new security trait, which gives them better optics. They have the Granatbüchse 39, which is really the best asset of the squad. Having an anti-tank rifle that can deal with half-tracks that come too close, but being still a beefy squad in general is quite nice. Though the fire output of these units weaker than like Grenadier squad also, so some comparison to other units with 20 hit costs, it's not that great, but it comes in great availability. And you can take this one upvetted if you want to, so it can outperform then the Kriegsmarine Infantry and Festungsgrenadiers when it comes to its weapon stats. And yeah, security trait, nice. Giving better optics, always nice. In Steel Division 2, it's not quite as impactful as it is in Warno, but it's still a nice thing to have. And then SS Junker coming around as the first of the SS units that are actually quite capable. This one really relatively low in availability, sadly, but gets you some MG42s, gets you some MP44s and some MP40s. It's a bit of an in-between unit though. Only costing you 20 points is the really big redeeming factor here. You're having good firepower with these guys in the mid-range, on the 300 meter range, and at 100 meter range you are somewhat okay as well with shock and this loadout here, but MP40 is obviously not that perfect, and MP44 is also decent at 100 meters, but not as good as an SMG, so it's a bit of an in-between division unit, and that makes it a bit harder to use, but for 20 points, I still take it, because it has a lot of flexibility. It just doesn't really shine anywhere. SS Landsturm, another Grenadier kind of unit, and this one is really not that great. The MG and so on is okay. The Stan, really not helpful, and yeah, availability is rather normal as well. You can take them high on higher veterancy, but there the availability drops quite hard, and it doesn't really add much. SS Landsturm, just a normal kinda infantry squadron. No anti-tank though is a bit painful, and that would really help out this unit. SS Schupo, also pretty bad. At least they now get security, though Schupos, you don't need that many units with security running around. As I said, it's not as strong as in Warno, and you don't need them on the flanks, and the Schupos damage output wise are so far behind other 20-point units nowadays, so it's a bit of a shame here. But at least they got a bit better. Still don't quite see them in this deck here with all the units around them. Ersatz Pioneers, we already have in 116th Panzer. It helped out quite a lot there in the Windhund division. I'm pretty certain it's a decent unit here as well. You pay the same as for normal Grenadiers, whilst this is disheartened. So cost efficiency wise, it's not great, but it is super card efficient, as you get 12 per card here for 25 points, and that is really, really amazing. Meanwhile, the next unit here, SS Schuppenführer, also decent, way better than the normal Schupos. Has radio, has smoke, has security, decent availability, and has 7 hit points. So for 25 points, rather solid squad, but all the leader squadrons that we will get into here are rather solid squadrons. And the next one is the Festungsgrenadierführer, Panzerschreck, MG34s, Lebel, and 2 MP28s. So decent firepower on the mid-range there. Panzerschreck helping out as well. Costs you 5 points more, but the Panzerschreck is nice on your infantry unit here. And the 12 hit points also is fantastic for a leader. It means that this thing doesn't die. And you really can get a lot of leaders. If you combine that with the SS Wachführer, you get 11 leaders with 2 leader cards here. So you can really get all your guys leveled up. Kriegsmarineführer, pretty similar to the Festungsgrenadierführer. You pay 4 hit points for the radio trade, and you change Nebel Handgranate versus Panzerschreck. So you have to decide if that's worthwhile for you. But outside of that, really basic, like the rest of the loadout is really similar. So 2 pretty decent choices here. Both come with 6 availability in B. Kriegsmarineführer, if you want to, you can go up to 2 veterancy. Not sure if that's worthwhile though. Whilst then, Panzergrenadier, Hermann Göring is your normal Panzergrenadier. MG42s, Panzerfaust, Carabiner, MP40. It's a decent unit for the long range fights. It's nothing to discard here. That can be a decent option. But it is for sure not a must take here. If you want to have a C-phase spam, then the Panzergrenadiers here are what you want to go for. But outside of that, I'm not too certain. And then another really interesting leader unit here. A leader with a Flammenwerfer, the SS Ausbilder. MG42 as well, so it's a bit weird. It has 12 hit points once more. It has shock trait as well, so it does deal good damage. MP40, sadly not the best SMGs. But yeah, if you want to have an offensive leader here, the SS Ausbilder will be there for you in A-phase. And then we come to the strongest unit in this infantry tab, the SS Junker with Panzerfaust, which come with quite the firepower. They basically have the same firepower as Fallschirmjägers. They also have the shock trait, so in CQC they're even better. They lose 1 hitman with a G43, so they have fewer hit points, but they also are 5 points cheaper. And that obviously plays a big role. Availability is a classic high value unit availability with 6-4 here. And you only get them in A-phase, you only get 1 card, so you have to be careful with them. But behind all this man spam, this is a nice unit. So this is a nice unit for the deck. Really helping out SS Junker here. Really interesting infantry tab in general in Kampfgruppe von Tettau. And then tank tab is quite interesting as well. First of all, because you don't get any tanks in A-phase. And then what you get in B-phase is really outdated French tanks. Panzer 35R and Panzer 2F. So yeah, you don't get much there. 35R at least for only 10 points. And you get 16 of them. You can really flood the battlefield with them. But they are for sure quite weak. And then the Stuks and obviously the big boys, the Kingtigers, come in C-phase. And you get them in good numbers. You get both the P and the H version, both the Porsche and the Henschel turret versions coming in here for you. And they're both quite scary, obviously, with the H1 having the 20 extra frontal armor and going up all the way to 100 and 200 frontal armor, which obviously is a hell of a lot. So yeah, Kingtigers here for sure gonna help you out quite a bit. And then we have in the support tab at least some kind of armor in for A-phase. Flammenpanzer B2 F can come in A-phase. You don't get any for your Panzergrenadiers and so on, you don't get any special transports. All is Opel Blitzes. So this is the only kind of armor you get in A-phase, and you should use them, as you get a good amount of support slots. Outside of that, it's only security MGs and some 52p Russian support guns here that you get to support your units. You get at least a decent amount of choices when it comes to MG. MG42, the ZB53, some French heavy machine gun. I believe this is a Hotchkiss kind of gun with 1250 meter range. Then you get some MG34s and an MG08. So 5 different options for MGs if you want to take the choices there. And then you get Feldjägers, which are still great, even for 20 points. Having a scope, having 4 MP44s is a fantastic rate. So Feldjägers here, really helpful. And Discipline, also obviously really important with that many disheartened units, both in the MGs, but especially in the infantry tab. Having some military police unit here with Discipline trait is quite helpful. Feldgendarmerie, still not super cost efficient and stuff, but I would highly recommend taking the Feldjäger in B phase when you can get them. Anti-tank is your powerful armored vehicle in A phase. It is only 30mm frontal armor, but the Panzerjäger 35R is outside of that fantastic vehicle. Range and armor being its 2 weaknesses, but it has really solid penetration for a 25-point unit. It has some HE shells, not that many, but still some, and it has an insane rate of fire. And you can get them with quite solid availability as well, as they come with 6, 5, 4, so nice perf there as well. And these guys in A are super important. You only get 1 card, you don't get in crazy amount of numbers there, but the ones you get for sure are really, really helpful. And then anti-tank guns here, pretty decent as well. M42s and Pak 36s for the small stuff. 2 cards of Pak 40s that you can choose in A and B phase, which is helpful as well. And then Pak 43, which you can only take in B phase, but obviously on the way to the Stokes and the Kingtigers, for getting the waiting to be done easier, the Pak 43s and the Pak 40s will be really helpful. The infantry one here, 15-point Panzerschreck, decent as well. Granat Büchse 39, not recommended at all. This thing on its own doesn't really kill, so not really recommended in that regard. AA has a lot of classic units here as well. 1 new one though. Yeah, we have 20mm that you can take everywhere. 1 on the truck, 1 down below. I wouldn't recommend either. They are both just not doing enough to keeping the enemy air away. Flak 36 with 37mm, obviously quite solid. Still a lot weaker than Flak 41 or similar things, so it's not the best mid-range, but it's a decent weapon. You get it in A phase, can be taken there. Flak feeling on truck can be coming in A phase as well, and that should be your A phase AA. And then in B phase, you get addition to some bigger guns. The Flak M1734 is the first one here. 75mm, really long range AA. Issue only HE shells, and the HE shells also not super deadly. Rate of fire is decent though. Same goes rate of fire wise here for the Flak M31s. The taken over Soviet one here, which was made into an 88mm though, and which has AP shells now as well. 150mm of penetration, decent rate of fire, decent AA firepower as well. So this thing here can do quite some damage to the enemy, and can help out stopping the enemy armored columns before C phase as well. So I kind of would lean to this one, but the other one is 25 points cheaper. And yeah, it has some solid rate of fire as well towards the air and on the ground. So this thing can be worthwhile. Artillery tab is the reason why you don't need radios. Your only artillery is LAFH, and this thing is still pretty bad. But you get Nebelwerfer 42 and Panzerwerfer as your big boys. And then you get some 60mm German mortars, or actually in this case French mortars, and then another French mortar here. Yeah, which is quite helpful. Battery Führer helping out with all of that, but as I said, like without artillery with radios, it's not super important. Beobachter helping out if you need more, but that's mostly for team games here. So yeah, Nebelwerfers and Panzerwerfer, the most important units. Air tab is quite interesting, having some new planes in here as well. The Bf-110 G4B R3, not the most helpful of planes here. Has some 30mm, has some 20mm, but the issue with Bf-110s is that they're both super slow and not agile enough to do any dogfighting. So both not helpful. It can't win against the fighters, it can't catch bombers, so that's not a good unit. The next unit here though still has the issue of the clunkiness, but keeps the firepower. 6 20mm cannons. This thing absolutely shreds any head-on, absolutely hunts down any bomber, and it can do that because it's also super fast. It goes 670 kmh, so this HE219 AO is fan-freaking-tastic. This thing really can hunt. Availability is decent, not great, but it does get you through. BF109 G6 is your classic BF109, 20mm, 230mm. It's okay damage output wise, it's okay in the agility, it's okay in speed, but nothing here is great. Ju-88, pretty bad, relatively slow, and yeah, it has some 20mm in the nose, which I guess is somewhat helpful if you want to shoot something down here. This thing actually can deal some damage, but the bombs, 10 50 kilogram bombs, really not super helpful. BF109 with a 250 kilogram bomb can be pretty helpful. On the other hand, though, issue with this one will only be the bad resilience. And then we come to a new fighter, the BF109 G14, and this thing goes fast, 670 kmh, and it also gets the 30mm in the nose, so this thing can shred as well. Has to get a bit closer, but with that speed, that's not an issue. And yeah, you get a good number as well. And the 670 kmh here on an agile fighter is super, super good. The G14 for sure, great for getting air dominance. And yeah, the HE219 can do some ground strafing then maybe, or can hunt down some bombers even more. But yeah, these two planes for sure. Interesting level up here. BF109 with rockets is a classic one. Not super fancy, but it does the job. And then we have a Focke-Wulf G8 for getting some bombs on the enemy and doing some kills. 250 and 50 kilogram bombs, for sure some good bomb loadout. Means that it also has a bit of a longer reload time, but it has medium resilience, and this is big. Availability here is good as well, 246. So the Focke-Wulf 190 G8 here in that regard also quite helpful, and this really finishes up the deck quite nicely. So the defense is pretty standard as well. And yeah, the tanks with the Kingtigers, pretty interesting mix of infantry. Yeah, Recon not the strongest, but okay. Support gets the job done, does fill some gaps. Anti-tank is fantastic. Anti-air is okay. Artillery is based around rockets and mortars. And then air is really interesting. I'm really interested to see how the BF109 and the Heinkel 219 do perform. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys, here. Well, let's end it here. Next one coming up in the middle of next week. And yeah, don't miss them out here. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, do so down below so you don't miss the next Steel Division stuff. And yeah, see you there. Bye-bye, and have a great day.